it's not an easy thing to survive 3 downturns and still be here growing stronger and stronger, because we were recruiting during COVID. So,
right.
you know, and that's something to be really proud of. So I wanted to kind of talk about sort of customer journey, and how you've kind of worked through those transitional phases, I suppose, with your customers.
Good question. So I think one thing to recognize is that as much as downturns can be painful, they're also a big opportunity, and they help us to make the transitions or changes in behaviors that we might have been wanting to make, but that was never the driver or the need at the time. And this recent one has been a huge driver for remote working. And so we've been part of many projects where there's been an incentive to do it, but there's not been a massive push, because when the oil price is high, for example, there's not a big push to lower costs, and you can still be successful operating in a very inefficient way. So the recent downturn with coronavirus, and suddenly everyone's out the office.
Yeah.
It's just no choice. I think that's been really interesting to see how quickly people have started to adopt remote ways of working. For us, it wasn't really that different, because we already work very remotely with our customers, and the ones we've installed the tech in are already working remotely. They have access to it all now currently. So they were in many ways able to continue business as usual. There's the obvious cultural challenges about maintaining contact in the team and stuff, but in terms of actual being able to do your job, they could carry on.
I found it really shocking. I have to say, I found it really shocking, the whole, because remote working 20 odd years ago, I'm showing my age now, when I came out of uni, I went into a remote working position. So I worked with one big tech company around Europe, and I was the only person based in the UK. So everyone for me. So for all these years, I have used remote tools, comms. I find it easier working remotely than I do face to face sometimes. So to watch everybody adjust like that 20 odd years later, I found fascinating, because it's always been a norm for, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
I think the concept of remote working has been around for 20 years, and
Yeah.
certainly the vision in oil and gas has been in there. The thing that we didn't have realistically 20 years ago was the bandwidth or the web tech. So we were installing, back in 2003, I was on a project installing remote data for new oil rigs. The whole networking architecture and how you did the connection was new. Digital security, we were just figuring out, it was a new area really, and now it's well understood. And equally bandwidth. I mean, bandwidth to home. Back in 2003, I don't know what my home internet connection was, but it was no, that's right. I think when in our first house, it was dial-up. I remember CompuServe, and I mean, you couldn't do this. But now we've got 100 megabit connection to the house. It's fine, and anyone can have that.
Yeah.
So certainly 20 years ago, the vision was probably bigger than could really be implemented.
Yeah.
Computing, web technology, I mean, the number of iterations of the internet almost we've been through, web browsers now, I mean, it's so much further on. The amount of open source stuff, UI frameworks, we are in a much better place now. So I think the vision's been around, but realistically, we've only had the tech probably in the last 2 or 3 years to really make it good. But what I think is an interesting comparison is the switch between steam and electricity. There's similar parallels, because when electricity came out, all the factories used to run on steam. And so people say, well, electricity is a new thing, but it's very expensive to switch a factory from steam to electricity. And it never made sense in the business model. You couldn't justify it on a CapEx, OpEx return model. But what happens is the new factories that came along all installed electricity. And then suddenly, almost overnight, they could start to produce things a lot cheaper, and steam went out of business.